The use of the notwithstanding clause, the fact that this government felt that it was necessary to strip the rights away of 51,000 teachers in this province, that has landed with a thud nationally and internationally.
Hi everybody from the Canadian Teachers Federation. This is a special edition of Source. I'm Clint Johnston, currently president of the CTF FCE. What we're going to talk about today is actually one of the most significant education occurrences across the country this year, and that is the teacher strike out in Alberta. And what's really interesting about the teacher strike out in Alberta is how it was able to focus and bring the attention on, and this is largely, honestly, through the ATA's really excellent handling of the situation and how they chose to approach it publicly. But it focused attention across the country on what's really been a bit of an elephant in the room for anyone outside of education, and that is the increasing problem with retaining teachers, recruiting teachers, because of mostly increasing complexity in class size. And so that was really the kind of issue that solidified itself in Alberta. There were a lot of other ones, but I'm fortunate today to have the person who is best placed to talk about this with me, which is Jason Schilling, the president of the Alberta Teachers Association. So welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Clint. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and so thinking about the strike in Alberta, I think the first thing that we want to talk about, as I said, is how did you see this as an opportunity to really highlight, bring up, focus the attention of the country on class size and composition and what it's doing across the country?
Well, I think the strike did a really good job about making the classroom conditions that we're facing in Alberta front and center in the minds of Albertans at the time. And we've seen polling that has indicated that has happened. But really it's a lead up to that point, because through a couple of years of advocacy work and ad campaigns that we put together, a really successful one that we did in the fall was the least. And we really highlighted the fact that Alberta is the least funded in all of Canada when it comes to spending on students in schools by jurisdictions with operational grants. So that campaign really highlighted for the public the fact that, wait a minute, we're the least funded in all of Canada, yet we're the richest province. Like, how did that happen? And then sparked the opportunity to have further conversations about classroom conditions. And then, of course, once we got into the strike, really two main issues were top of mind for teachers. Salary, of course, which helps with retention and recruitment, but also classroom complexities and classroom conditions. And that was what people were really interested in talking about, because parents, community members can see that part of it as well. Students live it, parents can see it, and teachers are working in it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I'm going to try not to curveball too many at you today, but you mentioned the funding and how you started some time back with focusing on how you're the least funded across the country. And I'm just interested in your short thoughts on what's the interplay. We talk about increasing complexity in class size a lot, and that's a valid truth. But at the same time, I don't know that people are aware that the funding is slowly eroding and going down while that's happening. So what do you think the interplay is between? How significant is it?
It's hugely significant, and they're interwoven, and salary focus is into that as well, weaves right into that one also. You can't silo, as I would always say, these issues out. So the fact that we're the least funded, that our school boards get not enough money to address inflation and growth, especially student growth. We have seen a lot of students come to the province, which has caused our classrooms to explode in size. They come with a lot of complex issues, so English language learning, refugee students who are just not ready at grade level for a variety of reasons, and we don't have the supports for that. So our own surveying of our membership will say 90% will say their classes have increased, and 58% of them will say the resources to address the needs within their classrooms have decreased over time. And that's unfair to students, teachers, to school principals and administrators who are trying to manage all this on the school level, because they just don't have the funds to bring the resources in to address the needs of kids.
That's great. Thanks for that, because that's the problem I see is there are two graphs and they're both going in the wrong direction. So something else we saw, it's a couple of weeks since the strike has effectively ended. It doesn't mean the fight's ended. I know very much there's a lot going on out there still for you and your members, but I'm wondering if reflections you have. Your government chose to go a path to elevate very quickly to legislative means to get you back. And so I'm curious what kind of reflections you have on how that was impacted your membership, how it was for your members going back into schools and knowing that your government was willing to do that, and just your overall thoughts on how that happened.
Well, I think one of the things that we saw through the strike is that it was really effective in terms of bringing the public's attention to what was going on in our schools. There was a lot of support for teachers from parents, from communities, from businesses across the province. And again, polling shows that, and that has increased since the strike has occurred. Government had a lot of different options that they could have done. We could have got a negotiated settlement if they would have come to the table to actually sit down and have serious conversations about issues that we wanted to talk about. They could have done a variety of the things, then do a notwithstanding clause to strip teachers of their rights and to order them back and to force upon them a deal that they'd already turned down. There were other options for this government, but they chose, as we keep saying, the nuclear option on teachers because they didn't want to deal with the disagreement anymore. So they just ended it. Now, this had a big effect on teachers. They felt demoralized. They felt disrespected. They're angry, and justifiably they should be. I am as well, right? Because you do all of this work, you are hoping to make change that's going to make things better. And then you get ordered to go back to work into the exact same situation that you left. And so members should be angry. And they are still working at calling out the government on this. And so are parents, so are the community members. Like you said, the strike might have ended, but the fight has not because we are still seeing things that need to be changed.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, may I say, by the way, that I know you're angry. I've had enough chances to talk to you off camera, but you do a great job of holding that in and that keeping that professional delivery of a consistent and strong message. So I give you kudos for that. I think one of the other things I was going to ask about is you've described a real roller coaster. Having been in a similar position, that's a real roller coaster ride you've had to go through with your membership and the emotional ups and downs. And just wondering what your thoughts are on what is it like to lead through that? What did you have to draw on in your leadership skills to get your members through what was a very difficult time? Because to be clear, you've had a huge leadership role, your visibility across the country on this.
Well, it's one of those things I think when you get into these roles, I never anticipated that our press conferences would be streamed live across the country. But that's not an expectation you go in. I came into this role wanting to serve members and to make things better for teachers and kids at schools. That's the idea of coming into this. Through this leadership, through the strike, it's been interesting, and I've really had to draw on previous kind of conversations that I've had around how I was raised a little bit. So my mom is very pragmatic, and she passed that on to me. So I'm not one to panic. I don't tend to lose my temper very often. I did when I was younger, grown into a level of patience. But just understanding there's a lot of big emotions around this. And it's really key to listen to people, to figure out what is the root problem, what's really the issue that we have here at this point, and then try to take what you hear from members and articulate that moving forward in a way that the public can understand, the way that the press can understand, and hopefully you're hearing what members are saying and moving that forward. But I mean, you also have moments where, I lost my temper periodically, or I had my own sort of meltdown at one point. And you just surround yourself with people who are there to help you and support you and to even question you on whether or not the things that you're doing are making sense. And I think that's really important as well.
Well, I appreciate that. And I really appreciate your perspective as well, and making sure folks understand that there's a face of leadership, and you've played a huge role in this.
And it's not
also
easy.
A leadership team as well, right?
Yeah, and it's not easy because you then become the target of a lot of stuff. And there's been all sorts of things out there that you find yourself in the center of this attention that you never asked to be targeted in a certain way. And when people get mad at government or the school board or a bunch of people who they feel aren't listening to them, they'll turn to their union leadership because they will listen to them. And sometimes you just have to recognize the big emotions because we all have them, right? We're humans, so.
And your union leadership is accessible. And that's again why I think it's important, that leadership team you mentioned, that when you have those moments publicly for you sometimes, that you have them to come back and help you recenter, refocus, and get the real message from your membership. I do think that's a good segue almost, because you've mentioned a couple times already, it wasn't just actually teachers and yourself in the ATA. There were parents, there were other groups, there were labor groups, there were other people in the public who got so engaged in this. So I'm interested in your take on what was the path of public engagement, if you will. So how did it start out? What was that like, the perception of what you were undertaking? And then how did you work to change that, and how did it change if it did?
Well, again, this is going back a couple of years in terms of our media campaigns and trying to draw attention to the issues that we're seeing in Alberta schools. And you always have to have a conversation with your members and say, the media campaigns that we do as an association, and other associations will do this, and unions, are not necessarily for the members, they're for the public, right? And so we did a lot of work to lay that groundwork down so that people understood what the issues were. As we got closer and closer to the strike, we were very transparent about what was happening. When we got into failure of a memorandum of agreement, we decided to give actually almost 3 weeks notice to when we were going to go on strike, so that parents had an understanding of what was going to happen. So did teachers, so did students, so did the community. So they had time to prepare, but we also were hoping we would have time to get a negotiated settlement. And of course, that didn't happen. And when the strike came, it wasn't by a surprise. People weren't surprised for it to happen. And we had a lot of public support leading right up to the strike. And I'm very grateful for it. I'm very grateful for the support of the other unions that are within Alberta, the public and private sector unions that are there, and across Canada, CTF and other member organizations were great in terms of their support. And we've seen some polling just recently that came out, and that public support for teachers in the ATA has actually increased since the strike has happened, because they saw the draconian measures that government took, the notwithstanding clause, ordering teachers back, putting kids back into schools in the same situation, was not addressing the issues. And as much as government would like this to go away, teachers have flipped the conversation in Alberta around education. And there's no going back to just pretending everything was fine, because we all know that it's not. And the public expects more from government now.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. And I think we've talked about a lot of things that play into one kind of theme I'm thinking of, which is Alberta. The scale of Alberta's visibility was off the charts. Like you said, nobody expects to be streamed across the country in their interviews, but really it's a bellwether for the whole country. I mean, if you look across at any jurisdiction, province or territory, you're going to see similar issues, not identical. The geography is different, the students are different, but you're going to see the troubles with retention and recruitment, fueled by class sizes, class complexity, class composition, increasing violence in schools. They're not dissimilar across the country. But I often think that actually there's a root cause that's not being talked about, and that is the funding piece, and whether governments are just, in a sense, afraid to, unwilling to put the resources forward to address it. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not sure that the solutions are that complex. It just seems like provincial and territorial governments aren't willing to take the steps that they know are needed. What's your kind of thinking on that?
I agree 100%. The situation that we're in Alberta is no different than a lot of other provinces. And if you go into the States, it's the same thing as well. We're all experiencing a lot of the same issues. And funding is really the core element for a lot of it. One of the things that we see in Alberta is inclusion as a policy by government. So we have special needs kids who are included in all our classrooms, but they're not funded. Their supports aren't there for that. So, and we see that in other jurisdictions as well. I think it comes down to, this was years in the making. So we started to see this underfunding really start around 2015, and then just keep growing through the course of the next decade to 2025. To me, it's political will. Yeah. It's recently in Alberta, more so political ideology that is pushing this. Because we have a political party in power that believes it's school and choice. So for example, we are an outlier in Canada where 70% of private school funding is public dollars. And they made a comment during the strike, because it was pointed out, this conversation around public dollars funding private schools to the tune of $461 million a year. They said, well, we won't have private schools if we don't fund them. And I'm like, there's private schools all across this country that don't get public dollars, that run and operate just fine. And our policy at the association is, yeah, have a private school if you want. Public dollars should not be going to that. So these conversations are out there as well in terms of funding of the system. We're starving the public system, but increasing funding for the private system. Yeah. And that is something that was good to come out in terms of the strike, in terms of people talking about education and the funding.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it's definitely not the same across Canada, but I know there's other jurisdictions where some of the public dollars do go to private schools. And that piece about political will, I don't think can be overstated enough. I think that's the next really big piece of the conversation to have. I frame it as we've made a commitment to the children of Canada, that they're going to get a quality education that's going to help lift them up if need be from where they are, but certainly to help them achieve everything they can. And it just seems like governments have looked at the tab for that and just aren't willing to pay it. And
Well,
I think
that's
that's a real
yeah.
betrayal.
That's the thing, is that governments have cut funding for a lot of public services, not just education, but healthcare. Infrastructure is another one, right? So we're spending $8.6 billion on building and renovating new schools. That's a huge amount of money because they've let it go for so long,
Yep.
right? And so they've dug themselves into a hole, not just in Alberta, but other jurisdictions as well when it comes to funding. And then to fix it, the tab is really high.
Yep.
And they're like, oh, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Like, well, you have to do something because you're shortchanging the future of Alberta kids.
It's the oil in the car. You don't put your oil in your car. It's a cheap thing to do, but if you don't put it in long enough, pretty soon you're replacing an engine, and that
Yeah.
ain't cheap to do.
No.
So I think I'll give you this one really quick. Class size and complexity, we talk about it a lot across the country because sometimes it's seen as a silver bullet. Like, we see it as the source of a lot of the issues we see arising. Just your very short take on it. Is it the silver bullet? Like, do you think if we could nail that one down, that a lot of the issues in public education would be dealt with?
It's one of the things that is a major factor. But again, it goes back to the funding of that as well. So we can say, yeah, we're going to address classroom complexities, but we can't do it on the backs of teachers to do more, right? They just can't do it. They're maxed out, right? So you have to put the funding and the resources in there to help people do this job. Teaching is relational. It's working with adults in a building, with students. They're the biggest resource that we have within schools. So they should be well funded. They should be the resource that government is putting their money in. It's the people to work with our youth so that they can be successful and thrive, and then support them in the other areas that they need as well. But it's definitely one of the things that's driving members away from the profession. It's too complex. They don't have support. They don't have the resources. They burn out and they leave. And it's all perpetuating all of the issues that we see, the classroom complexity, teacher retention, and that as well.
So one last kind of question. I feel like you've told us what Alberta needs, what most of the jurisdictions in Canada need throughout, but if you want to add to it, for sure. Other than that, I'm curious if you think we've maybe hit a bit of a moment. Like I said, the scale of what happened in Alberta, it's not unique really. Teacher unions have gone on strike. Unfortunately, frequently over the last 5 years to decade. But it seems like the scale of it, the awareness that your organization did to bring it up in the public consciousness, or do you think we've hit a bit of a point now where that's really in the public's mind and we can push on that and make some progress?
Definitely. I think that when you talk to teachers about the strike and when we went back and whether you're thinking about was it successful or not, one of the successes you can take away from the strike in Alberta is the fact that this is very much a public conversation. So as you would know, as a union leader in BC and in Canada, you're always struggling, and so do other unions, about making their issues top of mind for the public, especially around an election time as well. Right now, education is top of the mind for Albertans because students were out of classrooms, teachers were on strike. Everybody knows about the story. And everybody's asking questions now of government as to, what are you doing about this? Why did it get so bad in the first place? And I have seen lots of emails and phone calls and evidence of teachers in public going to talk to MLAs to ask them about this. You're seeing this phenomenon in Alberta right now where there's recall petitions against MLAs. And a lot of the evidence or the explanatory notes of why they want to recall the MLAs is not only the funding, the lack of funding for education, healthcare, but the use of the notwithstanding clause. The fact that this government felt that it was necessary to strip the rights away of 51,000 teachers in this province and in order to force a settlement on them. That has landed with a thud nationally and internationally. Like, you're seeing news agencies and other organizations like Amnesty International speak out against the actions of this government. And this is a stain on them. This is something that they're going to have to wear, with the fact that they're a government that felt it was necessary to strip the rights away of Albertans, of Alberta citizens who they are supposed to represent democratically, and did one of the most undemocratic things that they could do towards them.
Yeah, very much appreciate that. Well, I think it's been a real pleasure, and I think the interesting thing to me is talking to you about the singular context in Alberta. It's a chance really to focus the conversation that I'm having across the country. I go coast to coast, and like I said, the issues are the same. We got a lot of teacher unions looking at, is this the year we need to take a strike action for some of them again? But it's brought that into a level of conversation that is much appreciated. You just encapsulated well. So yeah, thank you very much for your time today, Jason. It's been a pleasure to chat.
Thanks, Clint.